General Hayden, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you, Jake.
So I want to play some sound. I spoke with Senator Rand Paul just a little while ago and asked him how Edward Snowden should be handled, and this is what he said.
I think it was divulging a program that I think clearly there are constitutional questions about, and for which the Director of Intelligence frankly lied to the U.S. Senate and said, we're not collecting any data on any Americans, when in fact they're doing 1 billion pieces of data every day.
So he says there are constitutional questions about these surveillance programs and that there are serious credibility problems with the intelligence apparatus in this country. Okay. Do you agree?
No, I don't.
With either one of those?
No, with neither. But let me assume that I do for a moment, all right? To be a true whistleblower, you need to raise your hand inside the institution. You need to go to your supervisor. You need to go to the inspector general. You need to go to members of Congress. I mean, all of these things are laid out. And so if you think something's wrong, raise your hand and tell people that something's wrong.
How is this not a violation of the Fourth Amendment and illegal search and seizure? There's very specific language about needing a specific warrant for a specific individual in the Constitution. Right. This is mining millions of data and sticking it in a room and then being able to go in and get it later.
So you're talking, for example, about the so-called Verizon program, the metadata of U.S. phone calls? Well, first of all, the Supreme Court has ruled that metadata, the kind of stuff we're talking about here, is not covered by the Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Smith versus Maryland, 1979. So this is not a constitutional issue. Now, I understand it could still be a privacy issue. It could even be a legal issue, but it's not a constitutional issue.
1979, this is before the internet, this is before cell phones. Don't you think these things have to be revisited?
Well, I mean, I'd be happy to revisit them, but there's a process to revisit them. Right now, we've got a 5-3 decision from the Supreme Court that says that metadata is not constitutionally protected.
There's a whistleblower named William Binney. He was a former national security analyst, and he told the Daily Caller recently that the NSA could be recording the calls on the target list. That's just the smaller list of 500,000 to 1 million individuals that are being watched by the government. Is there any possibility that's true, that the calls are being recorded?
I can't conceive of it being true. Number one, I think it's technologically beyond the capacity of any surveillance agency to do that. And number two, it just doesn't make sense with what it is we know about this program. I mean, the agency gathers from American telecom providers what are essentially business records. They don't collect it. They don't put alligator clips on some wire somewhere. These are records that the company creates for their own purposes, and then under this court order, shares with the National Security Agency.
The NSA director was in front of Congress today, and he said that dozens, in his view, of terrorist events have been prevented in part because of information gathered from these surveillance programs. Is that true from your experience in the NSA?
I have no reason to challenge that, of course.
What about during your tenure?
During my tenure, what is now the Verizon program was part of what we now call, for that period back then, the terrorist surveillance program. And we did have a whole series of intelligence reports that came out of that program that would not otherwise have been available. Yeah.
Do you not understand the concern that people have, not so much that the program in and of itself or that you, General Hayden, are at issue, but that if history has taught us anything, programs like these are abused. There are not always just 100% good actors. You know, the Federalist Papers and these, you know, we are not angels. And the idea that you look at the IRS scandal, you look at the abuses, the wiretapping that went on to Martin Luther King that started with national security concerns and became something else. Do you not understand why people are really worried about this?
No, of course I understand it. I'm an American too. I come from the same bloodline of those folks who are very much concerned about this program. But I probably know a little bit more about the program, a little bit more about the people who are conducting the program. And at least I'm taking the time, Jake, to look at how the program is overseen. Now, I get it. Our Constitution was designed to prevent the abuse of power. And so you set up 3 competing branches of government, which frankly leads to gridlock every now and again, as we've recently seen. But the idea was you create these natural tensions within the federal government to prevent these kinds of abuses. In this case, you have 2 successive presidents, the 2 chambers of Congress, and the American court system all aware of the program and all through our political processes agreeing with the program.
Richard Clark, the former national coordinator for security and counterterrorism in the Bush White House, wrote an op-ed in the New York Daily News today, and he wrote, quote, "The law under which President George W. Bush and now President Obama have acted was not intended to give the government records of all telephone calls. If that had been the intent, the law would have said that. It didn't. Rather, the law envisioned the administration coming to a special court on a case-by-case basis to explain why it needed to have specific records. So he is saying that these programs go beyond the intent of the law.
Yeah, and a bipartisan majority in both houses of Congress apparently disagree with Richard, because they have authorized this program and continued to authorize this program. And frankly, the Obama administration was more transparent about this effort than we were in the Bush administration. I mean, they made this metadata collection activity available to all the members of Congress, not just all the members of the intelligence committees.
Last question for you, and as a former Bush administration official, do you ever find it odd, given how quiet the Obama administration has been in defending these programs? We had Clapper gave one interview and then disappeared. Obama spoke once and then disappeared. Meanwhile, all these Republicans, Republican chairmen in the House key committees, right, Peter King, Mike Rogers, former Bush administration officials, you guys are the ones coming forward defending these programs after listening to President Obama and before that Senator Obama say some not so nice things about these surveillance programs. How does that feel?
Yeah. There was a concern. All right, there was a concern among us in the Bush administration. We felt comfortable with these programs. Jake, we thought they were necessary. We believed that they were lawful, they were appropriate, and they were effective. And there was great concern on our part that the way candidate Obama had spoken, that some of these programs would be stopped. The fact of the matter is, most of them have not. Some of them have been expanded. That's actually really good news. Now, that's not something we in the former administration need to spike the football about and say, I told you so. We should just take kind of sense of satisfaction that what we were doing, once candidate Obama became President Obama, he saw that these were of great value and, frankly, were being very carefully done. The shorthand version about this, Jake, is national security looks a little different from the Oval Office than it does from a hotel room in Iowa.
All right, General Hayden, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.